Based on the investigation at this point, Sergeant, what are your chances of catching the individual or individuals before an incident like this occurs again?
I wouldn't be able to put it in a percentage-wise. There'd be no way for me knowing this, and I don't think anybody could put it in a percentage.
Are you optimistic that you will?
Oh, certainly.
Our interest was in all the children that were killed down there. There were the 4 primaries, and I didn't remember it was 3, but I know there were some before that, so we were interested in all the Oakland County murders. It was, because they may or may not be related.
The girl's nude body was discovered here along Franklin Road early this morning by a passing motor.
But we had, like I said, interest, and we had detectives working on it, and they were in the task force that was many agencies were involved with. But I don't remember any specifics.
I found out she was mentioning that, and the police brought them pictures over of her. I just didn't believe it was her until I went to the morgue to see her. And my dad couldn't even identify her because he just didn't want to admit it and that. And I couldn't even hardly identify her. And that. All I know is I want to get a hold of the guy that did it, or whoever did it. Because I loved my sister.
All I know is I miss her.
We went back and we looked at some of these reports and followed up as much as we could on them. They are not necessarily officially part of the task force investigation, but they are cases that are in orbit with this task force investigation. And if we get a lead on them, of course we'd love to solve those cases as well, whether they are officially part of the task force or not.
The next thing I knew, a voice was saying, "Don't move or I'll blow your brains out." And so I froze, and he told me to freeze, so I froze right there, and came over to me and told me to bury my face in the pillow, and then he covered me up with a blanket, asked me where the cash was, and I told him there wasn't any cash.
Footprints here in the snow on the steps and fingerprints here on the door frame are among the physical evidence uncovered by the State Police Crime Lab. Right now they're looking for a man believed to be anywhere from 19 to 25 years of age, 5'10" to 6 feet tall, very slender with a prominent nose and dark, long, wavy hair. He was believed driving a gold or green Cadillac, model 1966 or 1968.
It was very alarming. First we had Cynthia Cadieux, and then we had Sheila Srock, who was murdered in her home by someone who broke into the house. And it was shocking. Here you had a murder in the city of Birmingham, a place where there were never murders, and it was a child, a little girl. It was very alarming, and there were alarms that went off for the first time for many people that a crime like that can happen here in Birmingham, in our peaceful, no-crime community.
Since January 1st, 2 teenage girls have been found murdered while babysitting. Could these deaths have been prevented? Are there precautions?
When we go into a home, we insist that the parents leave us a list of any adults that they are expecting during the time that they're gone. If the doorbell rings and they peek out and don't know who it is, call the police and then call me.
For the first time ever for these communities, there was concern that children were becoming victims of crime, and we had never heard of this before. First, not one but 2 young girls killed in their neighborhoods. It was shocking, and there were fears on the part of many of us that there was one person or persons that were doing this. This was before these crimes were committed. So already our communities were on edge. These kind of murders that had never happened around here before.
It heightened the mass panic and fear. That's, you know, that was certainly a contributing factor.
Family members say that even if the killer is never caught, he'll have to live forever with what he did. And someday, they say, he'll have to face the Day of Atonement. Someday. This is Robert Vito, News 4, Roseville.
I watched mothers, every mother walked her child to school. And when school was over, every mother was there to pick up her kid. Kids weren't walking by themselves. And that lasted for a couple of years. It was just a horrific, I don't know, you want to say strain in the air, fear.
The whole community was in terror, and parents were fearful of for their kids, and we were all told to walk in groups together, and no one could come out of the schools unless their parents were there to pick them up. And yeah, it was horrible. It turned life around as we knew it at that time.
Parents, you know, would not let their children out of their sight, nor should they. So maybe the opportunities for future assaults, you know, became more difficult for this guy because the kids are getting smarter and smarter.
After the murders of 3 previous girls in the same area, in our suburban areas, this was another child who had been murdered. And after getting some details from this lieutenant as he would give them to me, I asked him, "Is there an Oakland County child killer on the loose?" And he paused for a minute and he said, "Yes, there's an Oakland County child killer."
They tied them so damn tight, you know. You try to fight, it just cuts into you.
How can you just kill a 12-year-old in the middle of a very busy intersection and no one knows anything? How can that be?
Their bodies were tossed by public roadsides, almost as if to taunt officers.
We were being told that these were isolated incidents. They were working on them and to be careful, but there still was no child killer out there that was a serial type of killer. So our communities were on edge. However, we thought our authorities were solving these crimes and it would all go away.
I'm guessing he was disguised as a police officer, disguised as a priest.
Pretty much at a standstill unless some people step forward.
The whole community was in terror.
This individual with the DOJ looked at my dad and just point blank said, "You know what? You got a bunch of sick motherfuckers in Oakland County, and it is one of the wealthiest counties, and all I'm gonna tell you to do is pay attention and watch your back."
We don't know how he was asphyxiated. He could have been asphyxiated by somebody holding a pillow over his face. He could have been asphyxiated in a trunk of a car that didn't leak air.
There were unusual aspects to this beyond the horror of a child being abducted.
My sister had premonitions that she was going to die. She knew she was going to die.
Money does a lot of strange things to people. It can do anything.
Oakland County enjoyed back then and still does today, enjoys a reputation for being a safe community, good place to raise a family, good schools and so forth. So to have 4 kids kidnapped and murdered right in the middle of the 70s in this county, it was surreal.
Oakland County is the wealthiest county in Michigan. It is now, and it was then in the 60s and the 70s. It's a place where people aspired to. If you were, many people who were in Detroit moved to Oakland County. There were green fields and brand new subdivisions. There were areas where you could build a brand new house. And of the people that were already there, they were growing families with lots of children. 2 cars were in the driveway instead of 1. There were attached garages, which was unheard of in the city. And all kinds of amenities were there, as they are now. But it was the growing center where people wanted to go with their families.
We grew up in Ferndale, a couple blocks south of 9 Mile, and west or east of Woodward. It was a good neighborhood, and all the neighbors were good there. Kids were safe. Us neighbors and kids, like my brother, we'd go to the park, play baseball. We'd play football on our front lawns,
On February 15th, 1976, Mark Stebbins was walking home from the American Legion at Livernois and 9 Mile, where his mother worked.
She worked as a bartender at the American Legion Hall in Ferndale, and there was a pool tournament there. And he wanted to go home to watch a movie.
I think it was 30 seconds over Tokyo, because he was a war buff. And when I got there and he wasn't there, it's like, something's wrong with this picture.
We don't know where exactly he was picked up.
My mom called from the American Legion. She asked me, is Mark there? I'm like, no. And she's like, well, I don't understand that.
He headed home and never made it.
She asked me, can you call some of his friends and see if they've seen him? Which I did. Nobody had seen him.
Ruth got home. She was a single mom. She was divorced. And she waited until pretty late, and she finally called the police and filed a missing persons report.
And the Ferndale police says, well, we have to wait about 24 hours to report a missing person. And it's like, for a child, a 12-year-old kid, you gotta wait 24 hours?
He's going home to watch a 1 o'clock movie on the theater, on the TV.
Didn't say anything about meeting anyone, or?
Nope, definitely not.
How well did you know the child?
Very well, 3.5 years.
Did he talk to you about anything in recent days, or?
Definitely not.
Just a normal activity of a young
happy-go-lucky boy. Just a happy-go-lucky kid. He never got no trouble, no way.
He was missing for 4 days. The Ferndale police were in charge of the missing person investigation at that time, and they wanted to put out a picture of Mark.
They asked for a photo of Mark, but she didn't have the money for those childhood photos.
Police artists did a composite drawing of Mark and put that out on the missing poster.
No one heard anything, no one saw anything. He was missing for 4 days.
The police were good enough to come back and communicate with my mom and her boyfriend. And then on the 19th, the bottom of the world just dropped out.
4 days later, his body was found at behind an office complex at 10 and Greenfield.
a person walking his dog in a strip mall in Southfield. I think it was called Fairfax Plaza. Saw something against a short brick wall, and he said he thought it was a mannequin. You know, he walked up, and it was a body of a small boy.
I decided to go to class one day instead of playing hooky, and the vice principal's waiting outside the class. I'm like, oh. He's like, are you Michael Stebbins? I says, yes. He's like, please follow me to the office. And I'm wondering, okay, am I in trouble or is there something going on with this? And I got into the principal's office, and the principal informed me that he wasn't allowed to tell me nothing. Well, I started stomping my feet and pounding my fists, and then the principal gave through. He says, they found a young boy in Southfield that matches your brother's description. And then the Ferndale police came to the school and gave me a ride back to my house. And I met up with my mom and her boyfriend, and we just kind of had our little sorrow powwow together, you know.
The investigation immediately involved the Ferndale Police Department and the Southfield Police Department. His body was found just outside of a barrier wall, and his body was in his coat. His pullover jacket had been pulled, so you couldn't see much of his face.
At 15 years old, I didn't know what to think, you know. I'm just a young punk out there, you know. It's like, why would somebody take my brother off the street and do such brutal things and murder him? And I beat myself up for a long time, a lot of years. And it's like, I thought to myself, well, what if I would have walked home with him? Would he have made it? Or who knows, would they have tried to get both of us? I have no idea.
And at that point, his body was transported to the Oakland County Medical Examiner's office, where an autopsy was performed. There were kind of conflicting results as to what the medical examiner found at that time. A very early report indicated that there was the presence of seminal fluid, but a subsequent review of the evidence that we found, we could find nothing that indicates that any seminal fluid was ever recovered.
There were unusual aspects to this beyond the horror of a child being abducted and then his body being found several days later out in the cold. His body was scrupulously clean. He was clothed and apparently well fed. He was in the clothes that he last had on when he was abducted. And he was, if I recall correctly, found in a kind of a sleeping position.
No specific suspects. We're looking into a lot of background of a lot of people who have got backgrounds of this type of offense right now.
For the first time, after the killings of the girls, after the killing of Mark Stebbins, real fear shot through the community. Real fear on the point of hysteria.
December 22nd, Jill is at home in Royal Oak. They had recently moved to Royal Oak. Her mom was divorced. Her mom, Carol Robinson, they'd separated when the youngest was a baby. And she lived in Detroit, and she worked as a court reporter. And then she recently had moved the kids to Royal Oak.
I am Jill Robinson's sister. I was 9 and she was 12. Mom and my two sisters and I lived in Detroit growing up, and then we moved out of there to be in a safer neighborhood. And so that was in 1975, 76. And so right when we moved in the summer of 76, Mark Stebbins had already been killed.
Jill was not in a good mood that night.
Early reports had indicated she had a fight with her mother, and her father lived some distance away.
Carol repeatedly asked her, "What's wrong, honey? What's wrong?" Well, Jill was not talking. And they get home, and
I think my sister and my mom got in an argument about her forging a note about something. I don't know. Like my sister, I don't even know why she would do that. She's in 6th grade. But she was very headstrong and strong and smart and stubborn.
Jill went up to her bedroom, and Carol really wanted her to help make dinner. She wanted to help her by making biscuits because she was scheduled to go to church that night, and Jill refused. But it wasn't like an argument that the papers portrayed it to be.
She packed a backpack, got on her bike, and then left.
Maybe it was because it was a Wednesday night and she was very close to her father, Tom Robinson, who lived in Birmingham and was an English professor. And maybe it was because the Wednesday night that he was supposed to take the girls, for some reason, he wasn't going to take the girls. Whatever it was, Joe refused to make the biscuits, and Carol, who had a boyfriend at the time, says that the boyfriend had suggested maybe you should take a different tact with Jill. Maybe you should tell her to, step outside and think about things as opposed to, trying to play the nice cop, I guess.
I haven't seen her since, and I wasn't really very worried for an hour or so because she's very stubborn, and I thought she'll stand in the next yard and think about it or go around the block or something, and then I thought maybe she went to visit her father. And so I wasn't very concerned for a couple of hours, and then I got in the car and drove around and tried to find her, and that's when I called the police.
Has she ever done anything like this before?
No, never.
This is where it gets hard. Okay, so then, I don't want to do this. Okay, I'm not going to cry. But anyways, so she becomes missing off of her bike. Just a timeout.
Jill had pedaled off into the night. She'd gone to the garage and pulled out her purple bike. Actually, it was her mother's bike, and rode off into the night.
Her father lived some distance away. So what she did is she packed a backpack, got on her bike, and then left. And that is the last anyone had ever seen of her. Her mother noted that she never arrived at her father's. Her father's was very quick to report she never arrived as well.
I was the last one to see her. I said, "Jill, where are you going?" She said, "None of your business." Her and my mom had a little argument, and so I don't know, she was trying to get on her bike and go. And I'm the one that was the last one to see her, and I had to go out to the shed to look for her bike because my mom was gone to work or something. And so I had to go out and look, and her bike was gone. So my mom called back, and she's like, "Is Jill's bike there?" And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's missing. She's missing. She's gone." So we figured that she went to my dad's house, which was down the road on Woodward to Birmingham.
She was considered a runaway. Well, a missing child in this atmosphere is very alarming, and there was some talk in the community about this girl that was missing.
So I think that she went to my dad's, which was like 5 miles down the road, 6 in Birmingham. And she was last seen somewhere along the way at Tiny Tim's hobby shop or whatever that was called. I don't even know. And so she was sort of last seen there. They did recover her bike later on, and I don't know, but I don't even know if she made it to my dad's or not, or it was on the way back because he wasn't there. But it seems like she would have waited. If she got there, she would have waited. So I feel like she almost never made it there. And my dad never saw footprints in the snow or anything.
I thought somebody found Jill. It's okay.
Mrs. Robinson is especially worried because today, Christmas, is something that Jill was really looking forward to. She had saved enough money from her allowance to buy gifts. Gifts that still remain unopened.
She was missing from December 21st, and then they found her the day after Christmas.
The day after Christmas, somebody driving down I-75 saw something red in the ditch, and it was Jill. Within, full view of the Troy Police Department right there on the Big Beaver exit.
I remember, we couldn't open our presents. We didn't open our presents. We were waiting. She was gone. It wasn't even a Christmas. I don't even know what I got. Doesn't matter. But the day after Christmas, I was there when the cop came to the door and said, "Your sister's been shot in the head and found in the middle of I-75 in Big Beaver." And I remember my mom just reacting and being, how do you react to that? So very sad and hard. It was just like, she's gone, and they found her and shot in the face. My sister had premonitions that she was going to die. She knew she was going to die. She was born in the 12th month and died in the 12th month, and she was 12 years old. So 12 is a special number for me that I hold sacred to my sister.
When the police came to the door, Carol said that Jill had had a premonition that she was going to be shot.
So they said that she was, shot in the face and her body was found. And it's unbelievable to me that someone doesn't know something about her whereabouts from those days that she was missing, because how can you just kill a 12-year-old in the middle of a very busy intersection and no one knows anything? How can that be? So, I don't know.
Do you know that one of the headlines in the Free Press when Jill's body was found was "Runaway Girl Found"? Just the impact of what that did to Carol Robinson. I just wanted to remind you of that.
She was awesome. She was so awesome. She was just very, sort of withdrawn, but we used to play Charlie's Angels, and we went to camp together. I mean, how much recollection can I have, because she was like 3.5 years older than me, and I was 9 when she died, 9.5. But the whole thing is, we totally were best friends and had a lot of fun together. And she was very headstrong, and she was not stupid, and she was very book smart. She read a lot of books, liked our cat, and just had a lot of fun. She was withdrawn a little bit and quiet, but I think it's because she had these premonitions and knew she was going to die, and she was killed in a different way than the other ones, but somehow they linked her together with the other ones. And my dad was very reclusive and very upset, and it affected him greatly. Of course, my mom too. My little sister was not so much in the loop because she was so young. But Jill was my best friend, and so that totally affected me. My mom took her to a child psychologist because Jill was having these premonitions that she was going to get shot. And so my mom was like, Jill, no one gets shot when they're 11 years old. What are you talking about? This is weird. It's not right. And so she was seeing a child psychologist. That's all I really know. But her dreams came true, which aren't even, those are nightmares, not even dreams. I feared for my children's safety till they were 12 years old. And once they made it past 12 years old, I was so excited that they lived. Because 12 is a bad number for me, but also a good one at the same time. It's hard to explain.
I knew I had a great news story here, and I went on the air in our next newscast and did the story about the Oakland County child killer. It was the first time, I think, that anyone had ever uttered those words in our area. Little did I know that this wouldn't be the last one.
It will be a week tomorrow since Christine Mihalik disappeared while coming home from this store. In those 6 days, the community has come to realize that a missing child in this area is not merely the problem of the parents. Most of those out collecting funds today have families also.
Yeah, sure. I can remember riding our bikes. At the time, it seems like it would have been behind all of the storefronts there on 12 Mile on the north side. I think they maybe had like alleys and parking lots by them. And I remember riding our bikes with the neighborhood kids throughout that particular area. And really that's about it. And a few other memories that we had at our family cottage up north. I only have one memory that I recall from when she went missing, and it would have been my grandmother and I were laying in bed watching TV, and I remember seeing the news flash coming up with her picture in terms of missing, and the news channels asking if anyone had seen her. And I remember asking her, you know, why's Chris's picture on TV? I couldn't figure that out, and I'm sure my parents probably did not tell me essentially, you know, what was happening, and if they did, it certainly didn't recollect in my thoughts in terms of what was happening in terms of the scenario.
She disappeared on January 2nd, 1977. She vanished from Berkeley.
Christine Mihalik, who was 12, called her mom because she wanted to walk up to the 7-Eleven to purchase a teen magazine and a candy bar. And her mom said, okay, but be very careful. It was 3:30 in the afternoon.
I have witnesses. The clerk at the store remembers seeing Christine, described her to the police, remembered that she had bought a teen magazine and some candy. And I found other witnesses, kids that bowled at this bowling alley, that knew Christine personally and said that they had seen her after that walking east on 12 Mile from the 7-Eleven carrying a paper bag.
The money is being used for reward for apprehensions of persons or persons who are holding Christine. If it's not used within a year, if anyone should ask, the money will be turned over to the City of Berkeley for crime prevention against children in the City of Berkeley, and this is Chris's family's wishes. Okay. Thank you very much and good luck.
I think it's worthwhile. We have to find the girl. We need information to find the girl, no matter what the situation is, and that's why I'm here. I think this is the only way we can do it.
So she was last seen, that what we know of from this witness, at the Dairy Queen across the street is where she was observed.
Christine's grandfather, whose name is Bill Bell, and one of Bill Bell's very good friends was Lee Williams, Detective Corey Williams' father, who was also a Berkeley cop.
I knew about it as a young man. I lived in Berkeley, grew up in Berkeley in the 70s. My dad was a Berkeley detective. He grew up with Bob Bell, who was Christine Mihalik's grandfather. I remember when I was 15 years old, in January 1976, our family received a phone call in the evening, and it was Bob, Christine's grandpa, looking to speak with my dad.
And he called and said, Christine is missing. And by this time they knew. They knew there was a predator out there.
And so my dad went down to the Hartfields bowling alley where Christine's mother worked, and they all three met and discussed what needs to be done. And obviously he got Berkeley police involved. My dad had retired from Berkeley police and had just gone to work for Brooks Patterson at the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office as a detective.
So it's interesting because Detective Corey Williams can remember that phone call, his father getting that phone call and, you know, talking in hushed terms about just calm down. And that he ends up working on the same case his father did.
My dad since passed away in 1999. I never got to really talk to him about this case. I wasn't working it yet. And so I'm not clear on how involved he was in the investigation of Christine. But I have to believe, working for Brooks Patterson at the time of the Oakland County child killings, that he had some role in that as well.
Christine was kept for 19 days. I thought it was just so poignant that her mom said, Deborah Jarvis said the reason she was kept for 19 days is because they so enjoyed her company because she was such a sweet kid.
Her body was found 19 days later in Franklin Township, partially buried in a snowbank.
Later found at Bruce Lane in Franklin, Michigan, which 13 and Telegraph area, dumped in the snow, and I believe a mailman spotted her body that day she was found.
It's just a place that you can't go and think about where she would have been for 19 days and what she would have gone through. I just simply can't go there. My parents divorced when I was very young, so it would have been late 1976 that my parents divorced. And so at that time then, you know, my mom was married to Dan Mihalik and had my sister Chris, Matt, and Mark. They divorced, then my mom married my dad. So we had different fathers, same mother. So when my parents divorced, that is how and why I went to live with my father, as I was his only child, and the other three kids stayed with my mother. So with that being said, you know, I primarily lived with my dad, and there isn't a time that I can remember in my memory that my dad didn't always vocalize that the police knew who did it, because their line of questioning did not make sense. And he had many run-ins with Brooks Patterson at the time and different law enforcement over the course of those 19 days and thereafter, in terms of after she was found. And they basically told him, don't be poking and prodding in our department because you're not welcome here.
The medical examiner found no gross evidence of molestation, but there was an interesting note that I found in reviewing one of the reports, claimed that Dr. Shirley, who was one of the medical examiners at the time, indicated that he found seminal fluid in the rectal area. But again, that wasn't logged in later on, and there was no other notes for that.
We know the boys were raped, but the girls weren't. There was some discussion and discrepancy back then as to whether Christine was violated.
Very, very seldom do you have victims, like boys, being abducted by somebody that's going to abduct girls. That doesn't happen.
My brother was suffocated. Jill Robinson was killed with a shotgun blast to the face. And Christine Mihalich, I'm not sure exactly how they terminated her. Or Timothy King, I think he might have been asphyxiated also. But the two boys were sexually molested, but not the girls.
Was it a decoy in terms of trying to throw off law enforcement, that they are not wanting to only have it be susceptible to boys in order to create confusion, if you will? And so that's the only thing that I can come back to. But also, though, boys had long hair in the 70s. Jill Robinson had a haircut that was quite similar to a boy's.
These kids were, looks like they were abducted or drawn in off the street. So they're wearing winter clothes, winter jackets, you know. As we start approaching winter here in Michigan, you know, when everyone's bundled up, it's a little difficult to discern a man from a woman, a young boy from a young girl.
And what many people don't know is that Chris had also recently had a haircut. So the pictures that are out there in terms of what the media used in the 70s, she had long hair. However, it had recently been cut short right before her abduction.
In the Southfield Police Department, a task force was formulated. There were approximately 35 detectives from the following departments participating: Troy, Ferndale, Southfield, Berkeley, Royal Oak, Bloomfield Township, Birmingham, Oak Park, Franklin, Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, Oakland County Sheriff's Department, Michigan State Police, and the FBI. These 35 investigators from those agencies have formed a task force primarily to investigate and solve the Mihalich homicide.
There's kind of this idea that a task force is an official creation with some type of documentation or proclamation. It isn't. It is an agreement that various investigative agencies will cooperate together, share information, share resources. And this particular task force was reconstituted after the prosecutor was elected in 2009, and it was going back to the agencies that had either the victim disappeared in or the body was found, and it was a simple question. One, do you have resources that you can dedicate to us, to this investigation? And two, are you willing to put those resources to this investigation? And the answer in each and every case was yes. And it has led to, for example, re-examination of the physical evidence, a reevaluation of how the evidence was stored, a reevaluation as to the reports, as to how the reports are kept, our access or ability to access this information. So it's been a serious effort to find real evidence.
I stayed and played pool and let him go home by himself. And I beat myself up for a long time because of that.
In my times that I've been living since she died in 1976, I've had about 4 dreams where she's visited me, and that's all. I'd be like, Jill, is that you? And she's like, yeah, it's me. And she's fine. She doesn't give me a whole lot of explanation or doesn't blame anybody or doesn't talk about anything. It's just she's there and she's fine. One time she just wanted to meet my son and my daughter, and so they were in my dream too. And so, I don't know, she just wanted to just kind of contact me and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm okay. She's never asked for any revenge or any resolution. She's just there saying hi.
I just think the turmoil was too great, and who could process what had just happened, and then to continue to see then another case in terms of Timmy King. So I think everyone tried to just make the best of what we had left and move forward with life and not dwell on it, because it certainly wasn't going to bring her back.
I thought somebody found Jill. It's okay.
It's, you know, time's ticking, and I want this to be solved. But none of my family wants to talk about it because it's painful, and also, I don't know, are we ever going to get any resolution? We don't know.
We received our call from Livonia stating a body had been found and that the clothing description was similar to that of our missing boy.
State and local police say they have no one man under suspicion yet, but they think he lives and works in Oakland County, is a trusted member of the community, and not just some ragged loiterer offering candy to kids.
Every member of the task force feels that someone has to know outside of the guilty individual, has to be aware of the facts and circumstances, maybe of not all of the crimes, but certainly of one.
My dad was traveling for work at some point. This would have been in the 80s. And he sits down and he, was on the airplane, and he sees the tie tack that this individual has on. And my dad says, "Oh, you must be with law enforcement." And he says, "Yeah, I work for the DOJ out of Washington, and, here in Oakland County doing a little bit of work." My dad starts telling him the story about the case and whatnot. And this individual with the DOJ looked at my dad and just point blank said, "You know what? You got a bunch of sick motherfuckers in Oakland County, and it is one of the wealthiest counties, and all I'm going to tell you to do is pay attention and watch your back." I always said it's the wealth of Oakland County that if any of this ever came out, you would figure out that there are a bunch of sick motherfuckers. And money will buy everyone off.